I let out a little squeal of excitement when the email came through that I had won the bid for the mirror. It was a beautiful French gilt plaster frame with perfect glass, which, considering its age, was rare indeed. I had calculated to within a millimetre exactly where it would sit, dead centre on the wall opposite the window in the bedroom. There was enough room between the top of the great plaster flourish of fruit and the ceiling so as not to make the mirror look too big for the room. The hunt for such a piece had been long but thrilling, the hunt of searching through site after site online, measuring again and again to find the perfectly proportioned mirror to be the centrepiece for the room. I stand at 6'4" and wanted a mirror to see the whole of me without stooping or standing too far back to lose perspective. It had to be antique. Nothing modern had ever caught my eye. Reproductions were tasteless and lacking quality, albeit they were flawless and undamaged by time and carelessness. Besides, the rest of the room was wonderfully plain and simple. Nothing fussy or unnecessary in any of its fittings or furniture. A bedroom needs to be free from distraction to settle the mind before sleeping, and cleaning is made so much easier. The mirror, however, I wanted to be bold and striking. Crevices and curves that collected dust and debris could be tolerated when the beauty of the frame was so elegant. Cleaning and polishing the gilt plaster frame would be a pleasurable pastime, a relaxing hobby rather than a chore. The glass itself was the biggest obstacle. Antique glass is so full of imperfections. Like glasses that are worn all day, every day, they scratch and dull until your sight is clouded and your mind infuriated by the constant speck in the periphery of your vision. I've given up on glasses. 4 pairs in 1 year because of their faults drove me to undertake laser surgery. I still have the dips either side of my nose where the frames used to sit. I sometimes miss my glasses, peering over them for effect in conversation, or having something to hide behind like a shield or visor in uncomfortable social situations. But I threw my last pair into the middle of the road when I walked past a building site, and the concrete dust that speckled the lenses took so much effort to wipe off that tiny indents were forever left on the surface, and they had to be got rid of. This mirror had perfect glass. There was not a scratch or blemish in the structure, and the surface was so smooth and perfect that it almost made your eyes hurt trying to take it all in. I was amazed at how a looking glass with its unaltered or restored silver back could be unblemished after 200 or more years. The gilding was a little worn in places, but that didn't matter. One would not notice the paling of the gold around the edges when the glass was so dazzling. It arrived in the morning as promised. I was slightly alarmed to find 2 Neanderthal-like men handling it from the van to my door, but they proved to be well-trained and experienced as they, almost choreographed, brought it to its final destination in the middle of the wall opposite the window. I'd offered tea and coffee, and they declined as I'd hoped. I wanted to be alone with my mirror. I wanted to stare at its perfect surface and gilded frame that was alive with fire from the beams of light shining through the window. I had cleaned the house from top to bottom. I wanted it to sit in splendour from the minute it arrived. I'd run the vacuum round as the couriers left to remove the invading grit from outside, but now the place was spotless. And there sat my mirror, my 200-year-old gilded mirror in its new home. It was 3 days later when I was doing the usual housework when I noticed the mark. I felt a pang of horror through me. I was polishing the metal of the light switch to its proper shine when out from the corner of my eye, the scratch filled my vision. I stopped polishing and went over immediately to work out what it was. I hadn't touched it, so it couldn't have been a careless scrape as I'd walked past. No one else had been around to see it yet, so I couldn't accuse an over-eager friend of handling it. Had I missed it before when I polished the surface after the couriers left? No, I'd spent so long admiring every inch of it. I couldn't have missed it. I went into the kitchen, brought back the glass cleaner and paper cloths, and started cleaning the surface thoroughly to survey the damage. With one wipe, It was gone. The mark was gone, and all was well again. I continued my usual regime of housework as normal and forgot about the mark on the mirror. The house next door had a for sale sign put up last week. Thank goodness. They'd never looked after the place properly. They were young and too interested in their careers to worry about how they lived. I have a career, but come home to enjoy the fruits of my labour. Why make so much money only to live poorly? They said they were moving up the property ladder and found a house further out of town in the up-and-coming area. I assumed up-and-coming meant that it couldn't get any worse, so it could only improve. I wished them the best of luck and struggled to recall their names. It didn't matter, they never called me by mine, so I assumed they had forgotten it. I came back into the house and went into the bedroom. I had an event that evening and no one had mentioned the dress code. I wondered whether to play it safe and dress formally so as at least not to stand out as too casual. I pulled a couple of things out of the wardrobe and placed them on the bed. My eye was drawn to the wool suit in dark blue. I thought a double cuff shirt would go best, but then wasn't too sure what cufflinks to use. I didn't want to look like I'd come straight from a board meeting, so perhaps the monogrammed ones would be too much. As I pondered this, I took up the various options of ties and held them up to the mirror. My eye instantly fell on the same spot where the mark had been the other day, and to my horror, it was there again. But this time it was different. It didn't stand out as a single scratch, but more as if wire wool had been rubbed over it. I bent down to look closely and used my hands to skim over the surface. It was smooth. The scratch seemed to be from underneath the glass. My brain dizzied as I tried to work out how that could be. It simply couldn't. I ran my hand over and over the affected area, trying to feel for something. But it was as smooth as it had ever been. Not a mark on the surface. It was from under the glass. The silver backing was unaffected, but there were distinct scratches that could not be ignored. I dropped the ties back onto the bed and picked up the phone to search online for a possible cause. I paused to think of what to type. How to remove scratches on glass was the first thing that made sense to me, and so I typed in such a hurried panic that spelling mistakes and spaces between words jumbled and the search came back with jargon. I breathed in deep and tried to calm myself. I typed again, and this time was successful. All the answers to my search, however, were useless. None had advice on how to remove a scratch between the glass and the silver backing. I tried typing in how to remove flaws from antique mirrors, and page after page was about professional restoration and conservation and life hacks that were no use at all. I calmed myself again after I felt my frustration bubbling up and making my hands shake. I decided that I could do nothing now, so might as well go out, enjoy my evening, and sort this out calmly the next day when I had time to think. I didn't enjoy the evening. My mind constantly flew back to how I was going to save my mirror. I didn't mention it to anyone. They wouldn't understand. They'd say I was obsessing again and say cliched phrases at me like, "Let it go," or "just chill out." Such phrases make my blood boil, so I just listened to people's small talk and wrong opinions. I arrived home drunk and miserable. The taxi driver didn't know my address without me dictating the postcode as he tapped it into the sat-nav. He drove badly too, braking too hard at every junction, speeding up to avoid catching a red light. I fell into bed with my clothes still on and couldn't remember if my shoes were on the outside or inside of my front door. I woke up at eye level with the mark on the mirror. It was different again. The scratches were there, but the silver was blemished too. My heart sank and I crawled out of bed into the bathroom to dip my head in a sink of cold water. I managed to get to the kitchen without throwing up and made a mug of tea. I started to feel alive and alert as it worked its magic, as it always did on a hangover, and I started to potter around to put breakfast together. I went into the bedroom with determination. After searching online properly for solutions, I needed to examine exactly what was destroying my antique mirror. The glass had been so unsoiled, and this blot had come from nowhere. If the mirror showed signs of age and decay, I could understand. But it was so concentrated in this one place which baffled me. The first instruction I followed came from a website dedicated to the care of antique mirrors, and so I undertook cleaning the surface area with a dry cloth. At first I didn't see the point, as it was already clean, plus the offending mark wasn't on the surface, but, prepared to follow the guide to the letter, I started to gently polish the area. The soothing sensation of letting my hand run back and forth over the smooth glass brought a wave of calm over me, and I started to breathe in time with the motion until I had no idea how long I'd been there, gently rocking back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. With a flare of excitement, I noticed a change in the glass. The mark was fading. The offending scratches and blemish under the glass was waning. I didn't know how, but it slowly started to disappear. I continued to polish, getting slightly faster in my enthusiasm to remove the vile stain. I pushed hard into the glass too as I rubbed back and forth again and again. My breathing was becoming laboured as I polished, and I could see before me the stain lifting, the scratches fading, and the glass becoming clear again. My eyes were fixed on the spot, not seeing anything in my peripheral vision, the corners of my sight becoming darker and shadows formed around the edges. I kept on and on, rubbing the spot again and again, back and forth with more force each time. The room behind had disappeared, and my vision was narrowing, so I could only see the perfectly clear and bright glass without a stain or mark upon it. I stopped moving. My breathing returned to its resting pace, and my vision cleared to reveal the empty space around me. I couldn't move. The space I inhabited had no dimensions. I could feel no floor and sense no ceiling above or walls around me. I looked out ahead and saw no reflection of myself. I had polished my image away and saw only the empty room reflected in the mirror. The spot where I had been crouched seemed so far away, and the edges of the room were beveled. I have no concept of time anymore. I have been crouching with my hand outstretched, polishing away a mark that isn't there, but my view is no longer the reflection of my bedroom. It changes. Soon after, I was in a warehouse, then a living room in a city apartment, a dance studio, a dining room, and a long hallway. The view hasn't changed for a long time now. Now I am in a hotel somewhere in the countryside. Now and again I see people stare at me, but it's not me they see. I see them look just beyond my hand. They move their fingers over me as if to remove me, as if to remove a mark that irritates them. And every time someone becomes irritated and obsessive enough to rub and rub at the glass, they disappear, and the view changes again.